and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, but I've had absolutely no ideas as to what kind of video content I can do, but at least today is really obvious. That is my January wrap up. I started the year on a nice, slow, easy pace, not trying to like read 18 books in 1 month and not trying to read really long books, but just nice and easy, trying to find books that I know I would like to read. So I only have 4 books for you today and a little bit of manga, but I still really enjoyed what I read for the most part, and there are a few books I might have a lot to say about, so this might be a long video despite the short amount of books to talk about. But the first book I read for the year of 2022 is The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. You might recall that I just hauled this. It was one of my Christmas books that I purchased for myself. And John Wyndham, this is my second book by him. I had previously read The Day of the Triffids, which I absolutely adored. Like, Day of the Triffids is so intelligent, it's so smart, it's clever. The Chrysalids I also very much enjoyed, but I don't think it's as clever as The Day of the Triffids. I think this is a lot more of an obvious plot. It went in a lot more obvious direction, but I still very much appreciate what the book has to say, and it makes me definitely very glad to have read more of John Wyndham, of which I do have one more book on my TBR by John Wyndham, which is The Midwich Cuckoos, which I'm also very excited about. And I don't know, I see myself reading that this year as well. I usually don't read more than one book by an author in a year, just because I like to spread them apart to make sure I always have access to their books if I really like them. But his books are just so tempting, so it'll probably happen. But The Chrysalids, basically, what is it about? It's society, or what they call in this book, what they call the old world. The old world has crumbled. It's been devastated by some sort of well, it's actually been devastated by a mistake that the old people did, and it's quite it's hinted at it having possibly been a nuclear disaster. The old society had progressed to such an extent that they were sort of manipulating genetics and manipulating society, manipulating nature and whatnot, and it got to such a point that they destroyed themselves. So now you're in this world where little communities have built themselves around the world, and we focus on one community that is very much insistent on following the ways of the old people, obviously the ways of the old people before the collapse, but most importantly following the way of the old people in terms of very moral and very proper, like, Christian views, ideas of purity and sanctity and cleanliness of the body. And the thing is that the reason it's not even so much Christian views, but it's this idea of the way, you know, being what God considers man to be. So 4 arms, 4 legs, all your fingers, no strange mutations, no variations in the body. And so it's very much a society that's really insistent on these values, and they basically destroy anything that is not under the image of God. Anyone who is born with any sort of mutation or deformity or whatsoever is cast away from the village. Any crops, maybe if it's a corn that grows 2 heads instead of just 1, they'll destroy the crop to make sure that any potential genetic variation within that piece of corn won't be passed on. So they're very, very keen on keeping a pure genetic race along the lines of the old people. And what follows is that the son of one of the most prominent families in the society has the ability to send his thoughts out to other people who have his ability. Some are located in his own village, and some are located in areas at a fairly at a bit of a distance, maybe a few miles, but still in other areas. But there are all these children that have basically this genetic variation in their body where they are able to communicate with each other just by sharing their thoughts. So basically telepathy. And it is very important that they keep this secret hidden, so that they're not cast away or destroyed or basically disposed of. And what happens is obviously their secret is going to get out, and what are the consequences of that, and what do they have to do, what does that mean? And so yeah, I think it's a very classic idea that we've seen before, and it definitely the book goes in a direction that's very obvious, but I still really enjoyed this because really, I mean, the book is so much a look at society of what it was, what it is right now, and what it was before. And in terms like what it was, you can think very much of like white colonialism, considering other races to be below, and so other races had to be disposed of. Right now, basically the issues that the trans community has having to go through and being othered, people thinking, oh, well, there's only two sexes, there's female and male, and any sort of variation on that is otherly, and it's not proper, and it's not under the image of God. God created two sexes, that's what we should be doing. So in terms of a current situation, that would be kind of the connection with this book. And then in the future, if just as the book says, we do start having genetic variations where telepathy and things like that do become possible, then once again you're creating this whole new potential for othering. So I think those concepts that are brought out within the book are very well done, very fascinating. There's one page in particular that I would like to read as a particular paragraph, because it is talking about this concept of the new people versus the old people and what God intended. And so one character replies, I don't know about that, who does? But we do know that we can make a better world than the old people did. They were only ingenious half-humans, little better than savages, all living shut off from one another, with only clumsy words to link them. Often, they were shut off still more by different languages and different beliefs. Some of them could think individually, but they had to remain individuals. Emotions they could sometimes share, but they could not think collectively. When their conditions were primitive, they could get along all right, as the animals can. But the more complex they made the world, the less capable they were of dealing with it. They had no means of consensus. They learnt to cooperate constructively in small units, but only destructively in large units. They aspired greedily and then refused to face the responsibilities they had created. They created vast problems and then buried their heads in the sands of idle faith. There was, you see, no real communication, no understanding between them. They could, at their best, be near sublime animals, but not more. So very fascinating. I think this book really delves so amazingly into this topic. Do I prefer The Day of the Triffids? I do, but that doesn't take away from this book at all. This is equally as fascinating a book. So yes, really love the Chrysalids. So happy to have started my year off with this one. Makes for a very strong start. So the next book I read was called, it's a Japanese book, and I read it in the French translation called L'hiver dernier, je me suis séparé de toi. The original Japanese title is Kyonen no Fuyu, Kimi to Wakare. And there actually is an English translation already out in this. I think it came out about in 2013, which was Last Winter We Parted. And this is by Nakamura Fuminori, or Fuminori Nakamura, if you're going to say it within the English order of first name, last name. And the reason I wanted to read this is because this author, Fuminori Nakamura, is coming out, well, he's not coming out, but there's a new, there's a book this year coming out, which is a translation of one of his books, a new English translation. And that is definitely, that was on the list of books I had for coming out this year. And because that was coming out and I already had this book in hand, I kind of wanted to get a feel for his style to see whether or not I would be tempted to buy the English translation. And this book gave me, I went through a variety of thoughts, okay? And the thing is that I didn't I don't dislike this book. I don't like the book either, but I see what the book did by the end, and I can see that it was clever and that people would like this because of that. But because of the style the book is written in, I'm confused about the author, because if all of his books are written in the same style, then I wouldn't like this author. But if it's only book that is, if the style of the book is only in this book, then that's perfect. Then that means he's a really good author, because the book explains why the book was written in that style. And so if he's able to do a different style for other books, then that means he has like a wide range in writing. So it's really hard to explain how I feel about this book. But basically, this is a thriller, and it's about an author who has decided that he is going to write a book about this man who is on death row for killing 2 women. And he goes into the very first interview, and the man on death row says, "You really shouldn't write this book. It will destroy you. You are not ready to write this book. You are not ready to know the truth." And the author, of course, sort of ignores that and decides to start writing the book. And so he starts interviewing the sister of the man on death row. He starts to interview other people who are related to the case. And that leads him into a very, very dark world, as expected. Now, the thing, and this is where I bring up the whole reason that the style kind of was very strange for me, is that the book is kind of presented, every chapter is like either a document or an interaction of a character. And it's not necessarily always the same character that's been interacted. So you're going to be confused for quite a while of it, because sometimes you have these scenes and you're like, well, who are these people? Who are they talking? What does this have to do with the book? Or you have a document and you wonder, okay, is it the author of this writing, this document? Is it him that's examining the document, or is it someone else examining the document? And that is actually where the book like gets the thrilling part. It's where like the twist comes, basically, without revealing anything. But it's after you read it all, and at the ending, the last chapter explains basically why this book was presented this way, and who is who, and what is what, and what were they doing with who, with whom, and why, and whatnot. And when I read the last page, I was like, oh, that was really clever. But I didn't really like this book. So it's just one of those things. I think this is definitely a question of personal preference, and it has nothing to do with the author by himself. I think he's very clever. I thought this book was very well done. But because there was so much confusion, that was on purpose, but because there was so much confusion, I found myself very, very disconnected as I was reading this, and I really struggled to care, basically. So, like, again, once I read it, I was like, oh, that's really clever, but I kind of don't care. So, a little bit all over the place with this, but I definitely think, as always, when it comes to thrillers, every time I've reviewed a thriller on this channel, it always comes down to either you like it or you're not. It depends on your preference. But when it comes to thrillers, you should, if the plot sounds good, just read it. I mean, they're such quick reads. Just read it, see where you land, and have fun with it. So yeah. So I still had fun with it, still confused, still didn't like it, but I still had fun, and I thought it was clever, basically. All right. So then I wanted to stick with some French, and I wanted... so if you watch my sort of intents and ideas video, it's not really a goals and resolutions, but sort of intents and ideas. I mentioned that Tristan from Tristan and the Classics YouTube channel had a list of 12 classics that he wanted to read this year, and it turned out I had maybe like 3/4 of the book on his list, and I had maybe half of the books actually physically with me here in Japan. And I thought it'd be really interesting to read those with him. That way I can sort of share ideas and have like, so like basically he's read a lot of books that I've already read, but because I read them so long ago, I can't really recall some of the details he points out. And I would really like to be able to watch his videos with those details very fresh in my mind. So I decided that I was going to read those classics with him. So Tristan, if you're watching this, hello. But yeah, so I decided for the very first book of the year, which was very serendipitous because it turns out he read this in January as well, although I did not watch his video because I did not want my review to be influenced But that is this book has nothing on it, but that is, and the spine's coming off. But that is Le Père Goriot by Balzac, or Old Goriot by Balzac, Honoré de Balzac. Very big French classic, which I've owned. Well, I've probably owned it longer since this was kind of in my family, but it's been on my physical TBR since about 2009. I had actually started it in 2009, but I think in the middle of reading it, I went through a horrible heartbreak, and I never finished it. Basically, I realized I hadn't absorbed a single word, so I put it down, and I knew I needed to read it someday. Someday has come, and I am so happy to have read this. I absolutely loved this. But here's the thing. I absolutely love this, and I almost don't want to explain why. I think sometimes when you read a book, there doesn't need to be any literary criticism. You don't need to analyze everything. You don't need to delve into the nature of the book. Yes, I can talk about how I really enjoyed the characters, and I liked the look at the high society and low society within Paris at this time. But at the end of the day, I just got lost in the story, and I just really appreciated the interaction between the characters. And I don't feel like really analyzing this. I just liked it. You know, it was just one of those gut reactions. I just absolutely loved reading this. I will tell you what it's about, though. It's about a young man, Eugène de Rastignac, who has come to Paris as a student. He doesn't really come from a well-off family, and he's staying in this sort of like a modern day share house, but I don't remember what the word is. But it's like he stays in a building that has an owner who also does the cooking and has like a cleaning staff and whatnot, and he leases a room in this building, and he leases it with other varied characters, one of them being Mr. Goriot, along with other characters like Vautrin and Madame de Machin Chouette quelque chose, whatever. I don't remember all their names. But basically, Eugène has sort of decided that he needs to be a part of high society in Paris. He realized that he's not going to make it unless he has money, unless he has a social standing, and unless he withholds some power. So he goes to his, he writes a letter to his family and asks for help, and his mother suggests that he goes visit his cousin in Paris, a very distant cousin, but a cousin nonetheless in Paris, who actually is part of this very high society world. And this cousin decides to help Eugène in his task. She's very curious, she's very interested in the idea. And then he ends up borrowing money from his mother and his sisters so that he can sort of take part in the society. And of course, things go wrong, things go well. There's another man called Vautrin, who's kind of like a very bad guy, but we don't really know why for most of the book. But we're trying to find him out, and he decides he's also very interested in Eugène's case and how he can sort of profit from it. And Eugène is has sort of fallen for the young daughters of our friend Goriot, and Goriot, we discover, has basically given up all his money to these daughters so that they can be in high society, while he lives in utter poverty. So it's all these interactions between these characters, and it's charming and witty, and it has really funny moments, but really like desperate moments, and it basically just shows you how life is very much a gamble, and Eugène has to learn how much life is a gamble. Sometimes you win very high and exciting, and you can move forward, and sometimes you lose in an absolutely miserable kind of way. Now, like I said, you could critique it and say, well, maybe the characters, Vautrin, kind of, what happens to him, maybe we don't get resolution. Eugène as well, we don't really get that much resolution into what happens after the end of the book. But do we need to? I like to think that this is kind of just, this book is basically a glimpse at a world, and it's not actually a glimpse into Eugène's world, it's actually a glimpse into Père Goriot's, the old Goriot's world. And so once his world ends, there's no need to go and have resolution on the other characters, because once that world ends, well then Goriot would be unaware of what happens to the other characters. So I think just this glimpse at this moment in time in Paris, where high society was this much lauded area you want to be, and it's basically leads you, well, you might as well be miserable in high society than be miserable in low society. So I absolutely love this book. I'm so happy Tristan kind of put the idea back in my mind to read it. So yeah, really absolutely loved it. And yeah, I'm interested to see his video coming. Well, it's already out, but I'm interested to see his video now that I've given my own review. And speaking of which, Tristan, if you're watching this and you want to follow me, follow you, just to let you know, I'm reading East of Eden, and I'm actually almost done. But loving this. So if you want to read East of Eden in February and see how I feel at the end of February, feel free. But yeah, East of Eden, John Steinbeck. I'm in the middle of this and absolutely adoring it. Fantastic. Probably one of the only books I read in February because I'm not reading because of the Olympics. Winter Olympics are the best Olympics. And yeah, totally distracted. All right, so now I want to get into the last book. And this last book, I know I've already been talking for 20 minutes, but like I said, I read very few books, but they really did something to me this month. Like I really, really got a lot out of them. So the last book is the very first book of the year in my brand new Japanese language book club, which I started with my friend, where we decided we were going to read one Japanese language book per month this year. And actually we now have a third member because one of my Japanese friends has decided that he wants to join us, and he read the book with us. He also read our December read with us, and he's already read the February read, but he's Japanese. He can read this stuff quickly. But in any case, we chose the Akutagawa Prize winner, Tsume Tome. Let's not get the reflection or the glare. Tsumetome means nails and eyes. So fingernails, not like nails, but like fingernails and eyes, by Fujino Kaori. This won the Akutagawa Prize in 2013, and it has not been translated into English thus far as of this video. And this is basically a literary horror. And I think you do need to know that when you enter this book, because knowing that creates this tension that is crazy. And I have to tell you, I love this book. I hate this book. I said, what the hell am I reading? Why am I reading this? This author is crazy. Who comes up with this? Wait, no, I love this. Wow, wait, no, you did that? Really? Huh? I love this. So, roller coaster of emotions. This took me to places I did not think it would take me. So basically, this includes, and I have to point this out, so you have the main title, which is Tsumetome, which is about 110 pages or so. Then you have a short story called Shoko-san ga wasureteru koto, which means the thing that Miss Shoko forgets, which is about 15 or 20 pages. And then you have one more story called Chibiko Hiroba, which is basically the Chibiko playground, so little playground, which is again another 20 pages. Now, I had to read the last two stories to properly be able to communicate my thoughts on the very first story, which is very interesting because this all goes back to the idea that this is a literary horror. You have to remember this is a horror. You're supposed to be horrified. So what is this about? I really should just make a video entirely about this book because this book took me places. So the first book is called Tsumetome, so fingernails and eyes. And basically what it is, it's a story about this little girl and her reaction to her father's mistress coming in to move with them after her biological mother passes away. Now, there's a lot to this. The fact is that this story is told in a very false second-person narrative. So the little girl is narrating, but she's actually narrating the story once she has already grown up. So she's narrating the story from the viewpoint of when she was 3 years old, and she refers to the mistress as you. So I first met you when or not I first met you, but you first met my father when you were at the eye doctor's apartment. You first slept with my father when you first did this and this and this. So she talks to the mistress as if she's doing a second person narrative. And so what happens is we follow via this our narrator how the mistress sort of comes into this family. Now remember, the mother has died, and she's died in mysterious circumstances. Her body was found on the terrace, and she was locked out, and she just died overnight, probably from hypothermia or something of the sort. But there's no foul play to be considered. It was just a very unnatural and very regrettable death. But the father had already been having an affair with this woman, and when the mother dies, they decide that the mistress is going to move in on a sort of 6-month trial basis, because this woman, this mistress, is very much detached from society. She's a very emotionless person. She's very much someone who's just satisfied with the day-to-day of just doing the very, very basic. And the very basic is what she considers acceptable by society. Like, if society says this, then okay, I'll do it, because that's what's considered appropriate behavior. And the thing is that you have this mistress who's very much sort of detached from society, who is now sort of becoming this mother figure to this little girl who has very bad anxiety about the traumatic experience of her mother dying. Basically, the little girl now has this incredible fear of the terrace and won't even enter the living room, because the living room is attached to the terrace. And to release her tension, she bites her fingernails, and the mistress doesn't really know what to do with this daughter, so she just lets the daughter eat all day. She just feeds the daughter snacks all day without really considering nutrition or anything like that. And it basically comes to this book basically talks about the relationship about these two, and it's absolutely horrifying. You get to the the author builds this tension and sends you in certain directions that you think you're supposed to be going in, and then she totally throws something in where you're like, wow, and it is, it's cringeworthy. It's wow, it's intense, and it's harsh, and it's absolutely amazing. And so then, but the thing is that, like, I didn't really get to that sort of cathartic appreciation of the book until I read the second story, which is just, wow, who does this? Because the second story is about a grandmother being sexually abused in her hospital bed at night. Yeah. I don't know if the author is married, but I would be very afraid if I were her husband, because, like, who writes that? Like, who wants to read that? Who wants to read about a grandmother being sexually abused? I don't think anyone does, but it works. It really works. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrible. I was just like, why am I reading this? And why did she write this? But it makes sense, because the whole thing is that what I realized that the author was doing was taking very real issues in Japanese society, all about social issues, the role of women, sort of the interaction between people. In terms of the story with the grandmother is very much at a loss about how she feels detached from her own family. Her daughter doesn't really listen to her anymore. Her granddaughter could really care less. They're both just kind of eager to leave the hospital, and it kind of seemed like the daughter is just going through the motions of visiting her grandmother, the daughter is almost going through the motions of just visiting her mother in the hospital, because that's the appropriate thing to do. But when the grandmother is sort of showing suspicion to this man that everyone considers very friendly, they kind of ignore her, and they're just like, oh, you're just, becoming senile whatsoever and whatnot. So it's taking these very real issues, and it's creating a twist of horror that really makes this so really, really exciting, a prize winner. Now the last story is just pure, like, it's about just a woman. She's a mother to a young child. She's getting ready to go to a night out to celebrate her friend's wedding. And as she's getting ready, basically her son comes home, and he's absolutely horrified and terrified, and he's crying and he's scared, and she can't figure out why, but she needs to go out. And she goes out, and she's frantically, trying to message her husband, and her husband reveals that basically what happened is that the son had gone to the park. He had stayed a little bit too late at the park, and basically there's this legend that at like 4:40 p.m. in the park, if you're still there, a ghost comes out and will come to haunt you, and basically the ghost will try to tear you away from your home and bring you back to the park. So you're getting this this horror twist, this ghostly kind of twist, which is very exciting, and I really liked it. It was very clever, but you're getting this twist while also getting this viewpoint of a mother who's sort of realizing that she's okay with the fact that she's sacrificing her old life of going out with friends and hanging out with friends to be a mother, and she realizes she actually likes this role. And there's actually this one scene where she does end up at the party. She goes to the party, but she's very late, and she's really annoyed that she has to pay the 6,000 yen fee for dinner, even though she's late and there's no food left on the table other than like cold pasta and like the one dessert that no one wants because it's not really good. And she still has to pay 6,000 yen, which is $60, which is something I've definitely had to like suffer, and I understand the pain. It's like, why do I have to pay so much money for really bad food that you still have to go to a restaurant again after to eat because you don't even get full? So it's just like stuff like that. This use of social issues in Japan and having that get mixed with like the horror genre, I thought was absolutely clever. I totally understand why this won the Akutagawa Prize. And yeah, this was so creative, so much fun, roller coaster of emotions. But at the end of the day, I am praising this book like crazy. I thought it was so clever. Will it get translated? I don't know. My friend says I should translate it, but I don't know. But yeah, this is clever. Really happy to have started our book club year with such a strong contender. So absolutely fantastic. Then finally, during the month, here and there, I was reading some manga because it is definitely part of my intents and sort of ideas of, my ideal year would have a lot of manga be read, and I need to like read the manga that are on my shelves. So I read 6 volumes of Ranma 1/2, volumes 13 to volume 18. Ranma 1/2 is a series that I grew up on as a kid, absolutely loved it. It was just like, it has so much humor, and it's just a fun story, and the characters are adorable, and I absolutely love the art style. It's wacky, it's so weird, but it's funny, and it's just so nostalgic, and I just absolutely love this manga. And although I've never actually read it, to be honest, I don't even really watch the anime growing up, but this is the first time really reading the manga. And it's what's really great is that it's a manga that you don't need to really read continuously, because there's not really an overarching like story and arc that like, it's just sort of like a nichijo manga, which is like a everyday kind of slice of life kind of manga, but mixed with this concept of like martial arts and legend about Rama, who fell in a pond in China, and when he's hit with cold water, he turns into a girl, but when he takes a bath in warm water, he goes back to a boy, and sort of the chaos that ensues from that. And it's just such a really fun series, and I'm absolutely happy that I've read another 6 books in it. I'm not going to keep reading it right now because I decided to read something else, and like I said, this doesn't need to be read like continuously as a story. Like, you can just dip in and out every once in a while. And number 16 kind of like falls on a nice ending where the end of like the book is the end of like that story basically. But yeah, so happy to have read that. Really fun. So yeah, it was very slow start to the year, but I think a very strong, very stable start to the year. And I'm so excited about all of it. I'm very inspired to read East of Eden. Like I said, I'm so happy with that. Really enjoying the Japanese book for the Japanese book club that we're doing here in February. There is so much more to read, but I have to accept the fact that, I do have the Olympics. I love the Olympics. I'm also going skiing at the end of the month, so that weekend I won't be reading at all. But that's okay. These things happen. I'm still enjoying, and I'll definitely come back with more to read in March and whatnot. In the meantime, in terms of videos, I don't really know what I want to do, to be honest. Coming out with content is actually really, really hard. I'm not that good at it. But we'll see what I come up with. In any case, thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, wow, kudos. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.